Welcome along to Shanghai, ladies and gentlemen, where it's Chinese Grand Prix weekend. But before we can race, we need to qualify. And who's going to take that coveted pole position? How will our grid line up? We're about to find out. Welcome to qualifying.
All right, let's have a quick radio check, please. Radio check. Right, that's us pushed down into P15. Okay, we've only got one lap of fuel remaining.
And that's it for sprint qualifying. Plenty more coming up over the rest of the weekend. So we'll see you all tomorrow. So it's all about speed in today's sprint, not very many laps and no chance to get ahead on strategy. Who here today has the raw skill to take them to the top? Shanghai International Circuit, then, is a 16-corner high-speed thrill ride. The long and ever-tightening right-hander at turns 1 and 2 tests a driver's patience. And the flats, open to the elements location, test their skill in a crosswind. 2 DRS zones will assist passing, and they're available into turn 1 and down the kilometre-long back straight into turn 14. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting sprint. George Russell will begin today's event in pole position, edging out Max Verstappen, who'll start from P2. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Norris, Webber, and Sir Lewis Hamilton, and Hayes, Piastri, Leclerc, Antonelli, and Mika Hakkinen, Ocon, Stroll, Alex Albon, and Pierce, Hulkenberg, Hadjar, Jack Doohan, and Gabriel Bortoleto, Colapinto, Aaron, Behrman, and Liam Lawson rounds off the grid. Which of these drivers will get pole position today? We'll soon find out. And alongside me today, former Formula One driver and former world champion too. See, told you I'll give you a big intro. Anthony Davidson, hello. Well, they say that a change is as good as a rest, and whilst there's not much rest on show in the sprint format today, there's definitely a change to what we're usually seeing on the track. So we're getting close to the start of the race. What will this driver be experiencing? Big nerves? Big excitement? What?
Always extra nerves at the start of the race, Gruffy. It's probably at the start of the race, it's where your heart rate's at its highest in anticipation. And you've got to be in the right mindset. You've got to be thinking there inside the car, what can go right? How can I be opportunistic rather than what can go wrong? And how do I protect my position? Look forward and stay positive. It's easy to say, very hard to do when you're in that position.
Here we go then. The formation lap is underway ahead of today's sprint. As all the cars take their positions on the grid, the final preparations have been made, and all that's left is for the drivers to deliver on track.
now use DRS. DRS now available. Mind that front wing, is going to need replacing if it takes too much damage. Okay, gap to leader, 2.8 seconds. Lando ahead. Less than a second separates you. They're on fresh softs. Car behind you is Mark. Okay, the gap is less than a second. They're on fresh softs. Pit strategy complete. See these tyres through to the end now. Come on, just 3 laps to go. 3 laps. Okay, you've got P3, well done. The distance to the leader, 3.4 seconds. Lando's ahead of you now. Okay, gap to the car in front, 0.9 seconds. Okay, they're on old softs. Car behind you is Mark. Okay, they're on old softs. Look after these tyres now, you want to finish the race on this compound. 2 laps left, next time by will be your final lap. Okay mate, this is the final lap of the race, final lap. Okay, so we're leading our teammate by 1.9 seconds. right, race over. Take care of the car on the way in.
So that wraps up the sprint race, but there's still more action yet to come this weekend. We've got qualifying and, of course, the Grand Prix. Welcome along to Shanghai, ladies and gentlemen, where it's Chinese Grand Prix weekend. But before we can race, we need to qualify. And who's going to take that coveted pole position? How will our grid line up? We're about to find out. Welcome to qualifying.
Okay, radio check, radio check.
It's time again then for Formula One in Shanghai. Northwest of the thriving city of over 24 million people is a circuit that first featured in the championship calendar back in 2004. It played host to Formula One's 1000th Grand Prix back in 2019. The ever-tightening turns of 1 and 2 will prove tricky in the slippery conditions here in Shanghai, and anyone that slides wide will lose a lot of time getting back on track. Turn 14 should still be the best place for overtaking, but we'll have to see some improvement in the weather before the drivers can take advantage of that DRS assistance. Off the back of a fantastic qualifying session, it's time to see how our starting grid looks like for today's race. What a qualifying yesterday for George Russell. He'll start today's race from pole position, with Charles Leclerc alongside. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Hayes, Norris, Max Verstappen, and Hakkinen. Piastri, Webber, Albon, and Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Hamilton, Ocon, Nico Hulkenberg, and Aaron. Doohan, Bortoletto, Isaac Hadjar, and Lance Stroll. Colapinto, Lawson, Pierce, and Ollie Behrman rounds off the grid. And now it's time to head down to the track. And alongside me, a man, well, what more can I say? But he's a legend. Anthony Davidson. I know what we've got to do before the start of today's race, but what about our driver? What do the final hours look like for them?
Well, for them, you've got your pre-race rituals that you go through. You see different drivers that, some have got their headphones on, they're listening to the music. Some drivers really absorb the energy from the crowd and they're there waving to them. Other drivers, they go within themselves. They chat to their engineers, absorbing that information, that vital information that you need to carry you through the race. And, those pre-race rituals are essential to making things systematic. We do a lot of Grand Prix in a season, and the more systematic you can be, the easier you are within that environment.
Right then, the formation lap has started, and I must say the weather conditions aren't the best today for visibility and for grip. As each driver performs this lap, they'll be wanting to settle in and concentrate, as this race, in these conditions, will require a lot of focus. As the cars come back towards the grid to line up for the start of the race, each driver will be wanting to get the best start they possibly can, and they'll be hoping to finish today's race on the podium, and failing that, within the points.
track's going to be drying out quite soon. Be careful you don't burn out your tyres. That's P5, you're in P5. Okay, so gap to the leader, 4.5 seconds. Häkkönen's ahead of you now. Okay, gap ahead, 1.4 seconds. They're on a fresh set of inters. Norris is behind you. Less than a second separates you. They're on a fresh set of inters. That was our last stop. No more scheduled pit stops. Let's go. Okay, 12 laps to go. And gap to the car in front, 1.5 seconds. Okay, looks like some of those puddles are clearing. We're still definitely on the right tyre for the time being, but we're probably not a million miles away from slick conditions. No need to worry about the tyre condition for now, everything's looking good. Right, we need to get past here. Use overtake, use overtake. Okay, you've got P5, P5. Our gap to first place, 6.1 seconds. Okay, that's happening just ahead. Come on, red flag, red flag. We'll update you in the pits. Everyone's okay. Okay, so gap to the car ahead, 1.6 seconds. They're on a... Okay, we've done all right so far, but this is a chance to take a breath. We've got another half of this race to go, and there's still a big opportunity there. Okay, clear. DRS has been enabled. DRS is now enabled. Okay, the safety car is out. Safety car is out. We need to form up at reduced pace. Keep a close eye on that delta time. Make sure to keep it positive. Okay, slow down, slow down. Your delta's negative, which means you're going too fast. Reduce your pace. Safety car in this lap. Safety car in this lap. Let's make sure those tyres are up to temperature. And remember, there's no overtaking until the timing line. Stay in position until the green flags. Green flag. Okay, you're losing a small amount of time to the car behind. Let's keep pushing. No issues with tyre wear for now. Keep taking care of them. Okay, take it easy on the car. We can't sustain this level of damage. Okay, the stewards have now enabled DRS. DRS is now online. P3, you're currently in P3. Okay, gap to leader, 2.0 seconds. Leclerc ahead. Okay, the gap is less than a second. Piastri's behind you now. Less than a second separates you. They're on fresh mediums. Look after these tyres now. You want to finish the race on this compound. 2 laps left. Next time by will be your final lap. Okay, so we're leading our teammate by 2.8 seconds. Second place, you're in second place. Okay, Russell's ahead. Okay, keep an eye on that gap ahead, please. 1.1 seconds. They're on fresh mediums. Leclerc behind. Okay, the gap is less than a second. They're on old mediums. Okay, you just started the final lap of the race. Final lap. Yes, come on, we're on the podium. Good job this weekend. That's a great drive. Thank you.
We've seen a brilliant display of the Russell hustle. It's George Russell who wins.
And that's 2 wins in a row now, of course, Crofty. And it marks the fact that it's not a fluke. So, you know, their head's in the right space. What more can we see going forwards?
It's what every driver imagines when they start out on their long road towards Formula One. And for our lucky 3 today, here's the podium waiting for them. And taking his place on the top step of the podium, he gave it some hustle. Well done to George Russell. Well, what an end to another fantastic weekend of racing. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you for the next one.
Have you got a moment? Need your input.